Fed up and frustrated, Europeans who are tired of their government's coronavirus restrictions take to the streets. Police clash with protesters in the German city of Kassel, while dozens are arrested in the British capital. The most populous state of Australia is facing its worst flooding in decades after record rainfall. Thousands are ordered to leave their homes in the Sydney region, with the Premier of New South Wales saying the downpour has been worse than expected. And ballots are being cast in the Republic of Congo as the nation picks its next president. The incumbent is hoping to extend his time in office. The main opposition candidate, though, has tested positive for COVID-19, and the country has been left in the dark amid an internet blackout. Hello, I'm Thomas Waterhouse. This is the latest world news from Paris. As Europe battles to stop a third wave of COVID-19 from flooding the continent, many residents feel the screws have been tightened a little too much. On Saturday, a string of often violent demos were held in several cities in frustration at the rules, restrictions and lockdowns which have been imposed to curb the spread of the virus. Fraser Jackson reports.
1 year into the COVID-19 pandemic, and tempers across Europe seem to be fraying. Anger at lockdown measures and other restrictions has spilled out onto the streets. On Saturday alone, there were protests in Croatia, Sweden, Finland, Belgium, Poland, Austria and more. In the small Swiss town of Liestal, almost half of the population turned out to denounce the partial lockdown that has been in place since mid-January.
Das Volk will diesen Bundesrat nicht mehr. Sie will ihn weg. Verstößt gegen Menschenrechte. Verstößt gegen Völkerrecht.
We want to live in a democratic land. We want our children be free and safe, not with the vaccine. Definitely not with the vaccine. And we are not here for experimental issues.
Faced with rising infection rates, Germany has hinted it may reverse recent relaxations in restrictions. That didn't go over well with the over 20,000 protesters marching through the streets of the town of Kassel, where clashes broke out with police and multiple arrests were made. But the largest protests were seen in London. Despite the UK having the best vaccination rate in Europe and a roadmap out of the pandemic, thousands vented their anger at Boris Johnson's lockdown, which has been in place since just after Christmas, resulting in clashes with police. Under current lockdown regulations, mass gatherings across Britain are not allowed. That includes protests, which are not listed as justifiable reasons for leaving home. But rights activists have demanded the government make an exception to the rule and allow what they call the human right to protest peacefully.
Moving on, let's keep going. That was the tweet of encouragement to the people of the UK from their Prime Minister. This after the latest government figures show that just over half of adults there have now received at least one coronavirus vaccine. Boris Johnson's Conservatives are ploughing ahead to make good on their pledge to have everyone over the age of 18 inoculated by the end of July. Our colleagues at France 2 Television report.
A shot in the arm for Boris Johnson, and not just in terms of his immunity. The UK's highly successful vaccination campaign is also providing a boost in popularity for the Prime Minister. His personal approval rating has surpassed the leader of the opposition and is now at its highest level since last May.
I literally did not feel a thing, and so it was very good, very quick. And you know what I'm going to say, I cannot recommend it too highly.
The UK has so far administered more jabs than any country other than the US. 27 million people in Britain have now received their first shot of the vaccine. That's half the adult population.
He's benefited from the vaccine rollout. His opinion poll ratings are up, they're good. I mean, this despite the fact that in terms of protective equipment, and particularly the expensive and underperforming so-called track and trace system, didn't work very well.
Several European countries suspended use of the AstraZeneca vaccine earlier this week, but the campaign continued apace in the UK.
Didn't have to think twice about about having the jab.
It'd be better to have the jab than sit around debating whether or not it's safe.
A shipment of about 5 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine is set to be delayed next month, but Johnson is still confident that all British adults will be vaccinated by the end of July.
Over 79,000 fresh cases of COVID-19 have been registered in Brazil, along with a further 2,438 deaths. The government is continuing its talks with Washington about importing a surplus of vaccines. With Brazil's health system under ever-growing pressure, authorities in Rio have taken action and have closed the city's beaches, with authorities set to announce further measures this coming Monday. Sharon Gaffney explains.
Often packed with sun worshippers despite the pandemic, Rio's world-famous beaches are now deserted.
De nada adianta fechar uma praia e manter igrejas abertas. Os bares, os restaurantes, bombando, praia, ar livre, sol e esporte. Faz mal?
The move has also been criticised by a president who's consistently railed against social distancing measures and face masks. As Brazil registered its second highest daily death toll from the virus, Jair Bolsonaro said sun-deprived residents needed vitamin D to protect them from infection. Hospitals are close to being overwhelmed, with intensive care units at more than 80% capacity in 25 out of 27 states. Doctors say the age profile of those being treated is decreasing.
E o tipo de paciente que a gente está admitindo, ele tem perfil pouco diferente do anterior. A gente está vendo uma prevalência de pacientes mais jovens sendo admitidos, com quadros muito graves e que não têm comorbidades.
It's a trend that's being reported at hospitals across the country. Health experts say younger people aren't adhering to social distancing measures to the same extent as the elderly. Brazil's death toll has risen sharply in recent weeks to more than 290,000. Scientists believe the surge in cases is being driven by the so-called Brazilian variant, or P1 strain of the virus.
In other world news, authorities in Australia say the bad weather along the eastern edge of the country has triggered the worst flooding there in 50 years. Record rain has damaged hundreds of homes and several sections of road, with those who live in the low-lying suburbs of Sydney's northwest ordered to flee their houses in the middle of the night as the torrent approached. Carrie Scotland has more now on the situation in New South Wales.
An entire house washed away down the Manning River on the New South Wales coast. Sydney and surrounding areas are grappling with severe flooding after record rains in recent days. According to meteorologists, the extreme downpours are set to continue until Wednesday.
We will be seeing rainfall across the New South Wales coast, but really it's the mid-north coast today that is getting hit once again. And tomorrow we are expecting rainfall to re-intensify for this particular region. So keep a close eye on warnings and again expecting those river rises and that flood risk to continue.
Warnings of heavy rainfall and damaging winds are in place for a large stretch of New South Wales's coastline. On Sunday, more people were ordered to evacuate as authorities warned of potentially life-threatening conditions. The situation in low-lying areas of Sydney's northwest is said to be worse than initially expected.
There's going to be a lot of people that maybe don't get their houses flooded, but they won't get to work. The roads will be wrecked as well. So it's going to test and give, I think, a lot of people a bit of a wake-up call.
On Saturday, Sydney's main water source, the Warragamba Dam, overflowed, causing suburbs in the region to see the worst flood levels in 50 years. At least 16 government areas, mostly in the state's north, have been declared a national disaster.
After a 6-month-long trial, a judge in Pakistan has sentenced 2 defendants to death for robbing and gang-raping a woman last September on a stretch of motorway near Lahore. The attack sparked huge protests in several cities. With more, here's Kemi Nidlek.
Tried in a terrorism court to speed up the verdict, it's a major case that sent shockwaves through the country. But although the 2 men were found guilty of gang rape and sentenced to death, the executions won't happen for some time. The men were also handed down 14 years in prison, which must be served first, and they are also appealing.
और जब ये अपील टेकअप होगी
कोर्ट ने तो इंशाल्लाह प्रोसिक्यूशन इसका मुकम्मल अपने केस का दिफा करेगी और इस जजमेंट को अपहेल्ड करने की पूरी कोशिश करेगी.
The assailants were found guilty of attacking a woman who ran out of fuel by the side of the motorway outside of Lahore. She had been waiting for her family to come get her. The men smashed her car windows before robbing and raping her in a nearby field in front of her 2 young children. The case sparked off nationwide protests last year, demanding more protections for women in a country where many rape victims are pressured by the authorities not to press charges. Demonstrators were infuriated by Lahore's police chief, who repeatedly blamed the victim for having been out late at night. He said that as a resident of France, the woman had failed to understand that Pakistan was not as safe. Protesters called on him to be fired.
This is my country too, these are my streets, this is my road just as much as it is of any man. And I don't see them thinking twice before they leave or they do anything.
The case resulted in legal reforms, including new special courts to speed up rape trials and the chemical castration of serial rapists. Pakistan's conviction rate for rape is, according to official figures, as low as 0.3%.
2.5 million people are eligible to have their say in this Sunday's presidential election in the Republic of Congo. Ballots are now being cast, with the man who's held office for over 3 decades wanting to avoid a second-round runoff, with Denis Sassou Nguesso hoping to secure a 4th term in power. There are, though, 6 other names on the ballot papers, including the main opposition candidate Guy Brice Parfait Kolela, who's now tested positive for COVID-19 and could be flown here to France for treatment. This with a blackout on the internet and social media affecting the country. With more from Brazzaville, here's our correspondent there, Clément Bonneau.
5 years ago, in the last presidential election in 2016, turnout was just under 70%, which is relatively high if you compare with other countries in the region or with countries in Europe. But this time round, many observers fear that the abstention rate could be significantly higher. And that's because the main opposition movement in the country, the party of the former president Pascal Lissouba, is boycotting the election. 7 candidates are running for president in Congo-Brazzaville this Sunday. At 77 years old, President Denis Sassou Nguesso, who's been in power for a combined total of 37 years, is seeking a 4th term in office. Other candidates include former Economy Minister Mathias Dzon and former presidential candidate Guy Brice Parfait Kolela, who was 2nd in the last election in 2016. Polling stations opened this morning at 7 a.m. They will close later this afternoon at 6 p.m.
And we end this bulletin with a calming piece of classical music. The Cali Zoo in Colombia has enlisted the help of the pianist Mario Fernando Prado to entertain and soothe the site's ostriches, zebras, lions, baboons and so forth. The zoo's owners hope that this tinkling of the ivories will be the first of many musical performances to benefit the animals that live there. Let's end this latest World News Summary with this section of music which has calmed the flock of flamingos. Do stay with us here on France 24.